The Apriorian Thesis. There are two races and two realities, grounded in two systems, one of law, the other of morality. One way of living reduces risk, the other reduces faith. One path leads to civilization, the other to hate. We can live only in one of two ways. If we live in faith, fear is reduced. If we live in fear, faith is reduced. To have faith, we cannot perceive other people as posing a risk, for risk is the birthplace of fear. What represents risk is feared. When we can no longer handle the fear turns to hate. Hate overcomes fear when the fear can no longer be tolerated or endured. There are two realities. One reality is based on faith and the reduction in risk and fear and the elimination of hate. The other reality is based on fear and the elimination of that fear through acts of hate. Fear and faith cannot both exist in the same place at the same time. They are mutually exclusive, and this gives us two distinct realities based on the two views of life. These views of life are really two ways of dealing with risk. One way leads to reconciliation and the other to hate. When others represent risk to us, we need regulations to control the source of risk. The regulatory apparatus is called the state. The state is an ethical institution in that it generates rules for orderly living. These rules are meant to reduce risk and thus to manage the fear that permeates liberal reality. When the rules fail to deal with the perceived risk, then we encounter hate. Liberals promote freedom because others represent risk to them. They do not wish to be exposed to the risk others represent. Liberals impose rules on others to control the level of risk they are exposed to. This is why liberals buy insurance and demand policing, only not for themselves. The rules are designed to isolate and marginalize those who represent a risk to them. Conservatives will find liberals full of contradictory positions because conservatives represent a high level of threat to liberals. Liberals perceive conservatives, especially conservatives such as Trump, to pose a high level of risk to themselves. Liberals want no policing for themselves, but a police state for those on the right. Policing is just their way of handling a perceived risk. Liberals want freedom, even freedom from the costs of their choices. At the same time, they will demand equality. But equality is possible only when everything is highly regulated. Liberals are always fearful because they always face threats of loss when confronted by people who want to exercise the same freedom liberals have, but in a way that is inconsistent with what liberals want. Liberals want free speech, but not when the speech is offensive to them. They want property rights, but not when these rights conflict with their social agenda. Liberals are often very wealthy and powerful or poor. They either have so much power the rules no longer apply to them or are so poor the rules are irrelevant. One cannot lose a house one does not have or be fined money they never earn. Conservatives tend to be middle class. Conservatives do not burden others and work for what they want. Conservatives are rarely willing to take shortcuts to get what they want. Conservatives are not liberals because they know they are the ones who pay for the benefits liberals campaign for. The rich have their loopholes, and many liberals are beneficiaries of the social justice policies of liberal parties. Liberals are less likely to be the ones funding these policies. There are two races and two realities. Faith divides the one race and reality from the other race and other reality. Without faith there is fear, and where there is fear, hate is sure to follow. Liberals fear us, this is why they hate us. There is no reconciliation with the liberal race. We need separation from them. The correlate of faith is civility. High civility leads to civilization, low civility leads to division, war, crime, and so on. Only when faith is high can we enjoy the civility needed to build a great civilization. We need to separate from the liberal race. Conservatives need to create, as the body of Christ, as a church, a civil society free of fear and free of liberalism and its free living. Other people are not a source of risk unless they are the people of the flesh. Civility is a mechanism of separation. If we are civil, not only do we adhere to the civil form of living, but we also form a civilization, and by this means, our actions exclude the uncivil. Civility is a state of reconciliation. Civility requires all debt be paid and no costs remain outstanding. No one is a leech or parasite or a dependent on others in a civil society, not as an adult citizen. Seniors have a surplus saved up from their years of giving. To be civil, we begin a process in which we, individually and collectively, identify unreconciled accounts, accounts in which a balance remains outstanding. We collect the debt or we cut off credits to that account. A civil society is a reconciled society. To be reconciled, we need to balance our accounts. Reconciliation is when all accounts have been balanced. Civility is a process in which reconciliation is achieved, accounts are reconciled, and thus civility is restored. Reconciliation is the same process God uses to judge us. The book of life is an account book. Judgment is a reconciliation of accounts. In the judgment, we are reconciled to God. Our account is balanced. Civility is the judgment of man. We are being judged in a civil court, and we are judging and being judged as we would be judged. Because we know this is God's judgment and the way God will judge us. Ultimately, it is our choice if we wish to be reconciled or remain in arrears. We can gamble, as most do, that we can straighten out our accounts by winning big at some future date or be reconciled civilly. To be reconciled is to be civil. To be civil is to not impose costs onto others. The process of reconciliation leads to the creation of a civilization. A civilization is a body of persons who are reconciled one to the other, a condition in which the vast majority are positive contributors to the body politic. But the more the community permits some to live at the expense of the rest, the less civil and sustainable the group becomes. The problem with law is that the law can and is exploited by the lawmakers and regulatory apparatus of the state. The very nature of law makes it necessary for the many to support the few and the few to have control over the assets of the polity. Only when the creators of equity have control over their equity and the authority to prevent unwarranted access can true justice be implemented. Costs must be accurately assigned to the creator of those costs. This is called a market. A market that is not regulated by the state is called a free market. It is not enough that the state does not regulate the market must have the means to reconcile its accounts. Apriorian provides the technology needed to set up ledgers in which all costs are allocated to their appropriate accounts. Apriorian has the means to design and implement a civil society. If you wish to be reconciled, you need your accounts to be examined. We are not reconciled by our own hand.